Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about The Penguin, Season 1, Episode 2. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. First and foremost, I'm curious about Sophia's circumstances, like the nightmare she's having. Is it purely, she's having these nightmares and all of this. I wonder, did she suffer from any of this prior to all of this, or is it just the Alberto stuff that's kind of sending her over the deep end? Because as we find out more about her as the hangman, she murdered 7 women. For what reason, we do not know. So it makes you wonder, like, she obviously was a little disturbed beforehand. Going to Arkham definitely didn't do any good there for her. So it does beg the question, like, when did that start? I mean, it's so visceral that, like, she has these, like, almost sporadic, like, attacks. Like, it's just almost like to the point she's like clawing at her own neck. Like, she dug her nails into her neck and she had to go wash her hands because blood was on her nails because she dug so deep into her own skin. And then that's especially why she wears like stuff to probably cover up her neck, especially like at the funeral and stuff. She made sure to wear something that would cover her neck, so it could just be aesthetically, but it's also like it helps cover that up, which I wonder, has she had to deal with that in the past? Because I'm like, she's worn stuff in the first episode that kind of match like that. So I'm wondering, is it like a recurring thing? Or is this something new? Whatever the case may be, that was a brutal dream. It's like, right, her locked up in Arkham. And, well, it wasn't even a dream. It was her, like, basically under kind of, I guess, hypnosis by her therapist. Played by Theo Rossi, which I think is kind of interesting just because it's like, well, 2 people from Marvel TV being in a DC show is kind of interesting. Theo Rossi was in Luke Cage, and Saray Agdashlu was in Punisher. So just funny stuff like that, which is always kind of interesting to think about. Either way, he's trying to help her, I guess, through stuff. I wonder, is he her therapist? Like, is he like a family therapist in the sense that he's always been her therapist before she went to jail? Because I don't think we know how long she was in Arkham, but she did kind of, it kind of makes sense. Like, she murdered 7 people and got locked up in Arkham. It's like, no, you probably should be in Blackgate out of any place, but not Arkham. And it's like, that was probably a thing of, yeah, let's put her, it's like, oh, let's say she was mentally disturbed, and that way we can get her locked up in a quote-unquote, like, medical facility rather than, like, a hardcore prison where she belongs. I mean, people are literally at Alberto, like, out where the service for Alberto and his funeral and everything is happening. It's like people are outside with signs like, hang the hangman. She should not have gotten out, because it seems like it's a... she didn't serve any jail time. She was just locked up in Arkham, and I'm sure they were able to kind of just got released. We don't know if she probably in a very sociopathic way was able to just pretend like, yeah, I'm okay, because she pretends and seems like she can be well adjusted, but then she has moments where, like, the mask she wears slips. And like once again, the end of last episode is a great example of that mask slipping. Because I didn't even notice this until other people pointed out. I was like, they were like, yeah, I don't, that whole sequence, a lot of that sequence, she's not blinking, which is very disturbing. Especially just like the way, like, I believe her name's Christina Milioti. I hope I'm not butchering it, because I pronounce it like differently. Is it Melody? I've always heard it as Melody, but maybe I'm wrong. But, like, she's so expressive with her face and her eyes when she's, like, making them big, looking so disturbing, So it's just kind of like, she has the crazy eyes. She does that so well. And especially you add that in conjunction with her smile. It's like, oh, she's able to do that unhinged face so well. But either way, I love that, in talking about her therapy session, I love that the guy's like, hey, I can help you. And she's like, I don't need help. He's like, oh, you're safe. And she's like, I'm not. I'm home, which is very different. Which I'm like, there's layers to that of, like, being home doesn't necessarily mean safe. It just means there is no safety. It's Gotham. There is no safety. All you can find is home. That's all there is to it. So, but we have Oz sitting down with the Maroney family, and Sal's perspective on it is like, yeah, I know you screwed me up, and now there's going to this whole war situation, but I could always turn you into the Falcons. But Oz is like, you're not going to do that because the streets are buzzing. Like the Maroney name has spark to it now because it's like, yo, did you hear what the Maroneys do? Like, that's what Sal did. He's locked up, and it adds more legend to you. So it's like, yeah, like the streets are now talking about the Maroneys with some respect on their name after the big hit that you did against the Falcons, even though he wasn't behind it. So it's like, yeah, let me be your inside person. We could destroy this. We could get Alberto Shipman and everything. Like, this could all work out for us. Well, I think he's still keeping the Alberto shipment to himself because he's telling Sal about the drop shipment that they're transporting to like Robbinsville, but he doesn't tell him because the whole Alberto plan is something only him and Sophia are aware of. He tried to present it last episode, but no one was listening to him, so they're the only ones with the finer details about it to some extent. So, but either way, I even love, what was the character's name? Nadia being like, I believe that's Sal's wife, being like, okay, he's a dog and dogs can should, like in his case, he should be put down, but they can be basically brought to heel. Like, it's like, yeah, he can be of use to us. So let's kind of loosen the leash and see what he does. So, Oz has his plan. He's the plan maker. He's like, all right, what I'm going to do is you're going to hit the first vehicle and you're going to hit the truck. I'm going to be in the second vehicle. As long as you leave that alone, it's all Gucci. We're fine. But the problem is, Johnny shows up and it's like, yo, you're in there with the stuff. And it's like, no. I'm going to follow in the second video. It's like, vehicle. And it's like, no, you're getting in there. Because I guess it's like, you're muscle here, so do your job and be part of the muscle. So I also think it's interesting. He's the one that calls him Penguin. You could tell like how it irritated Oz. Oz does not like being made fun of or ridiculed. So it's like, all right, fine, whatever. So it's like, and he's on pins and needles because it's like, all right, I know the attack's coming soon. I love the whole Ray making he's like, oh, what's the difference between like a seagull flying over the sea versus the bay? He's like, oh, because they became a beagle, and you're just bagel, and you're like, oh god. I was curious to see how Oz is going to handle that. And the moment the hit comes, he starts blasting. Because Ray got hit by some incoming fire. The other two, Oz laid out after like making a joke. It's like, oh, what's the difference between a mafia and a government? One's organized. It's like, that's how you tell a joke, Ray. You got to know your audience. But yeah, that job went super sideways, and I was so curious how Oz was going to handle that, because I was like, well, you can't fake it at this point in time, because I'm sure the plan was like, oh my god, we get roughed up, we get like ambush, oh, let's back out of here really quickly. I'm assuming that's how Oz was going to handle it, because if everyone else dies and you survive, that's going to look a little, even if you come back wounded, it's like, oh, you just happen to be the only survivor. Luckily, Castillo ended up being alive, and Oz protected him. It's like, yo, Castillo, let's get out of here. So it's like, okay. So now it adds validity to Oz's point of like, yeah, we got attacked, and Oz is trying to, and I love like when you're in the wrong. That's the usual tactic of when you're in the wrong, you push back so hard just to cover your tracks of like, okay, I'm not about to get busted for this, so I'm doubling down on like, yo, you got screwed up. Like, if it wasn't for me, like, because even the others are like, yo, we wouldn't have even made it out of there if it wasn't for Oz. Like, yo, he handled business, and it's like, he saved Castillo's life and everything, so turning everything around on everyone, even trying to blame Johnny and them. It's like, yo, this is your route you wanted us to take. This is because of you, so... And him later on trying to schmooze up to Sophia, being like, yeah, those guys, they don't listen to you, they don't respect you, but we can work together. And Sophia seeing through his bullshit. I love that, because like even her Uncle Lucas is like, oh, she's always had a nose for smelling bullshit. And it's like, yeah, she's like, oh, you act like you know me and what's best for me, Oz. It's like, no, like, I see you for who you are. Like, why would you want to join forces with me after I did what I did to you last episode? It's like, yeah, like, you're just trying to take advantage of this situation, like the weasel that you are. Yes, we're calling him by a different name. I'm calling him by a different animal name in that regard. But yeah, like, he is weaselly in that regard, so... So he's not making headway on that front like he wanted to, but he knows it's only a matter of time because like, Sophia's not letting this Alberto thing go, especially now that she's got it in her head, rightfully so, that there's an insider. And that's the thing about like, yeah, I don't know, even if his plan went off without a hitch, whether or not Oz still would have, like, I think we still would have gotten to the same conclusion that Sophia would have been like, yo, we have an insider. She still would have come to that same conclusion because it's like she's still on the hunt for the person responsible for her brother's death. So with that wrapped up in her mind and just being like, oh, I see what's going on here, how things are falling apart, how everything's wrong, like she probably still would have came to that, definitely I feel like would have still came to that conclusion. So Oz would have had to deal with this in the same manner. It would have probably came up about the same time. It's just the road there didn't go smoothly like Oz thought it would. He you know, he does think a few steps ahead, but I don't think he thinks as far ahead as he thinks he should. So like I think he's like maybe 2-3 steps ahead of everyone when he should be and needs to be at least 10 steps ahead. He's good, but he is but it's also because like he's also very good at like adapting on the fly, which is a point he tries to make to Vic later on in the episode of you got to be quick thinking because it's like do or die. One slip up, one mistake could be the end of all of this. And it's like, well, you know, it's so interesting that he would jump down Vic's throat considering like all this shit happened because of you. Your impulsiveness and killing Alberto spiraled everything out from there. That was your impulsiveness. But yeah, your quick thinking, you know, oh, also shooting at a bunch of teenagers. None of that would have flown back in your face if you had maybe gone tracked down every one of those kids. You were worried about killing Vic, but you weren't worried about the others that got away. So there's layers to all this being on you. So any faults of Vic, it's like, yeah, this is on you because I gave you a job to do. You stumbled, but it's, yeah, we wouldn't even be in this situation if you hadn't kind of literally jumped the gun the way you did. So doesn't help that Sophia's got some extra investigative power as she gets a detective who's addicted to drops to investigate this situation, which led to the whole. I was curious like what role he was going to play in this. I wasn't expecting him to show up literally at the funeral with what's the character's name? Arvind? Was it Arvind? The guy that's still alive and was holding on, but it's like, yeah, and waited to, he's like, yeah, I got, you wanted information? I got you information that involves like dropping this guy off at your brother's funeral. Obviously the guy got results, granted shows that he's not, I mean, he is a drug addict, so you kind of go like, yeah, he kind of got a few screws loose. I am curious to see what the GCPD situation is going to be in this series, because that's been a question of some people being like, is there not going to be any real interaction with the GCPD? I guess it's like the viewpoint of the show is always going to be from the criminal point of view. This is probably never going to be a show where we're going to see the cop side of things. Just like, okay, Batman and the cops, like some of that stuff is never going to be like fully on their radar necessarily. Like that's how you could potentially write around it, but it's just like, yeah, it might just be like, oh, the cop stuff is happening. Maybe we do secretly have Batman investigating stuff that, you know, like, I mean, this might also be like Bruce might be dealing with Bruce stuff with the considering the condition that Gotham's in right now and still in, because we're still fresh off the Riddler stuff, that it's like he might be doing Bruce Wayne stuff right now instead of being Batman, you know. But also maybe some of this crime stuff is so on the lower end that the cops are investigating and we just don't see that investigation side of things. I don't know, maybe like the Batman 2 will kind of like touch on some of that. Who knows? Once again, we're only 2 episodes in, so that doesn't necessarily define like the entire show would just only be from this viewpoint. Maybe we will get a GCPD perspective on things, maybe not. We learn a little bit more about Vic. Obviously, like he's talking to one of the ladies that shows up at Oz's place, and he gets a text from someone. Was it Gracilla? Might be how you pronounce it. I'm wondering who that is. I wonder, is that like a grandmother or a significant other? Whoever it was, it's like, yo, are you okay? Because the way he talks about it is like, yeah, my family is like, all that I know is gone because of the flooding from Riddler, but it's like someone is trying to get in touch with him, and the question is who and what's that all about? I did love that, like, Oz told that story about how he eventually got into Falcone's good graces, because it's like he ended up being the driver for a guy even though he didn't know how to drive. It's like, yo, he was like, that was a Friday, and that, or I think he said that there was a Saturday, and that Monday I was there for the job. And he said, like, the guy was found out by Falcone to be a rat. So Falcone killed him, but took an interest in Oz, which I do think is interesting, considering the fact is Falcone himself ended up being a rat. So, but I guess, like, that's how that always, I guess, to some extent, how that kind of, like, can play out. I do wonder if this episode also teaches us that you can't take Oz at his word, because he will tell truths, but he will also sprinkle in lies. So it seems like, at least with the story he tells later on in the episode when he's talking to Sophia, it feels like what, 90% of that story is true, and then he adds in, like, he sprinkles in some lies, as he says, like, oh, my mom died a few years ago, which I can understand why he would do that. Like, for one, making the moves you're making, you could always put you in the crosshairs, and you never want to present yourself in the underworld with weaknesses, and family is a weakness. His brothers are gone, so it benefits him in that capacity, but he's hiding his mom because, for one, the last person you want to know that your mom is still alive is Sophia, but in general it seems like he's hiding his mom from everyone because she could be a liability and a weakness, which I'm sure her dementia is going to play a key factor in unraveling all that, because he's already told that lie to Sophia. So if she pops up and she's around Oz and says, like, oh, Oz is my baby boy, we're going to have a big massive issue, because Sophia's going to be like, oh, you lied to me. And so it's like, oh, like, I think that's going to be a key factor in that. Like, that's too important of a detail of him telling that about his mom. Because that's the thing, like, Oz can say some sweet stuff, but in the back of your mind, you're like, but I know you're bullshitting Sophia when he's telling her that story of, hey, like, when I lost my brothers, my mom couldn't even get out of bed, and when she ultimately did, it was just out of the blue one day, took me somewhere, and we had fun, like, we went dancing, and that became our thing. It was almost our way to kind of, remember my brothers. It's like, yo, if they were still alive, they would have loved it. But it's like, oh, but, what made your mom get up? He's like, I'd like to believe it was me, but I don't know. She died a few years back, so I'll never know. Which I think that speaks volumes about Oz, that, on some level, he hopes that, oh, I was important enough to be the reason why my mom snapped out of it. So, but that begs the question, like I said, like, there's truth in things, there's lies, and maybe I'm underestimating how much of that story is a lie. Like, her sleeping in the bed. I mean, I feel like there's truth to it, where he's like, yeah, eventually she just went back to work, and we kept it pushing, and we kept it moving. Like, she had her moment, and it's just kind of like, all right, time to dust myself off, get back to it. Still got a child to take care of, still got to make it through this world. So I don't know. I think that's fascinating. I'm just so, like I said, so curious how much of that story actually is a lie and how much it is true. I said 90% true, 10% lie before, but now, bringing all that up makes me second guess myself. I'm like, maybe more of that is a lie. We'll have to wait to see. Speaking of his mom, like I said, her medical condition, he has, like, the landlord keeping an eye on her, but she, like, wandered in the street, and she's saying, like, right, she's lucid enough to be like, no, I'm okay, like, I don't know why you got this guy watching over me, and then, like, them dancing together, it's like, yeah, dancing has kind of been their thing. It's been something that's kind of connected them through the hard times. But there was that line from her saying, if my son is nothing, what does that say about me? So Oz has got a lot on his shoulders that he has to prove himself, not only because he has to prove himself to himself, but also to his mom. It's like, my mom's done so much for me, so I want to do more for her. And any failures I have look badly upon that woman, the woman who taught me everything, who taught me how to survive, taught me how to keep going, made me the mover and shaker that I am today. So I have to do right by my mom, And, I don't know if he's always depicted that way, but in the comics, and I'm sure maybe it varies from run to run, but he does, at least some of the live action adaptations have kind of definitely leaned to him being kind of a mama's boy, which isn't always a bad thing. It's just like, but it's like, seems like his mom is the person he loves the most, his best friend, the person he confides in. So I'm also curious to see where the Eve storyline goes, because I wasn't sure whether that character would be recurring or not. But they got a very specific actress to play that character. The actress's name is Carmen Ijogo. I hope I'm not butchering her last name, but like, because I recognized her last episode, but I forgot to talk about it. But if I'm the thing I most recently saw her in is the show Your Honor. She's in both seasons. But yeah, I was curious whether that character is going to be a bigger, maybe more background recurring character, and it seems like that might be the case because she's the one that kind of sees through Oz. She's like, oh, considering like the news about Alberto, the night of, and I don't know if she heard about Sophia asking around. Maybe that got back to her, but now she's like, because she never said anything about like Sophia coming to visit her, because when Sophia was looking into what happened to Alberto, but she does figure out like, right, you killed Alberto. That's why you needed me to be your alibi. She's like, you doing what you're doing is putting me and my girls in danger. But Oz is like, yeah, you've seen me in worse situations and I always bounce back. I always turn out. It's going to be okay. I'm going to rise to the top. Then I'm going to open up a place better than the Iceberg Lounge. And you and your girls are going to be able to work there. It's all going to work out. But I'm also like, I'm so curious. There's just so many threads of like, yeah, you could see this all coming unraveled, whether it's Eve, whether it's Oswald's mom. There's angles where you're like, I could see the strings being pulled on those in the capacity of everything falling apart, but I don't know necessarily how we get there, but you feel like you could see that being peppered in, and I'm so curious to see where that goes. I doubt it's going, I mean, I was about to say, like, I don't know if it's going to be a self-preservation thing that she might end up turning on Oz. I'm just always scared in gangster stuff where you're just like, yeah, it's probably going to end up being the people you care about most that you end up killing. Like, I swear he's going to end up having to kill Vic or her. I hope not, but it feels like we might be heading in that direction. But, and again, these are like super, super early predictions. I don't know anything for certain. I'm just kind of spitballing stuff, throwing stuff to the wall and seeing what sticks. I meant to bring this point up earlier, but I kind of lost the thread of it and kind of got sidetracked with other stuff. But I had brought up that story that Oz had told about being a driver, and when the ladies were at Oz's place, you have Vic being like, "Oh, I'm Oz. I work for Oz. I'm his driver," which is certainly true to some extent. But it's also, I think this is kind of an interesting position that Vic finds himself in, just because of how he kind of forgets who Oz is. It's like, yeah, you kind of forget you're kind of working for a crazy dude, because it's like, yeah, this is a guy that kind of hired you off the street and is just, threatened to kill you, used you to dispose of some bodies, and this guy can't easily turn on you in a flip of a coin type of situation on a dime. So I think he got a little too comfortable is what I saw in this episode. Not fully comfortable, but I think he just figured like, oh, me and Oz were good. I'm kind of taken in by him, but it's like, yeah, Oz also shows like, not necessarily he could kill Vic at any point in time, but that is kind of like, the implication is there, but I don't think Victor's kind of recognized that implication, because later on he's like, yo, lay down on top of these dead bodies. I want you to know how effed up this game is. Like, the thing is, if you fuck up, this could be you, Vic. Do you want that to be you? So it's a tough love situation, but he also goes back to being like, all right, give me your hand. Just like, you gotta be quick on your feet, Vic. It's like he's trying to teach the kid because he sees a lot of himself in Vic. It's like, did I misplace my trust in you? I thought I saw something in you, but maybe I didn't. It's up to you to prove whether or not there's something there. So I think there's an element of Vic having like reality slapped back in his face of like, right, I got to remember what this really is, and my life is in danger on multiple fronts. Not only just about Sophia and them finding out, but also, hey, if push comes to shove, Oz will kill me. There's also that, hey, Oz will also throw me on the bus, because it's all about self-preservation for him, and it's like keeping you around. You're a piece on the board that can be sacrificed if needed be. The literal words that Oz said in this episode, sometimes, things calls for sacrifices, pal. So his initial plan when trying to give Sophia a needed her to give her a body. He needed to throw someone under the bus. And the perfect person for that would be Johnny. He doesn't like Johnny, and it's someone higher enough in the organization. But even Eve was like, yeah, Johnny's untouchable. Like, are you really going to be able to pull that off? But he wanted Vic to plant some jewels in his car and have... I forgot what his role in it was going to be. Because he was like, oh, right. I was like, how are you going to get... Because I knew he was going to get Arvon before Arvon ended up speaking to Sophia. But I was like, how is that going to work out for you? And he was going to get Arvon to mention Johnny. And I was like, well, Arvon's kind of high on drugs and stuff, so he's not thinking clearly. Because it's like, well, the moment you tell Sophia the name Johnny, you're as good as dead. Like, Oz would not have been able to get you out of that. And once again, he wasn't even thinking about it. Like, the end result was always going to end with Arvon dying. Now it's a thing of Oz has to kill him. He was probably going to have to do it regardless. I don't know. The fact of him saying like, oh yeah, sometimes there's sacrifices, pal, makes it seem like maybe he would have tried to find a way to get Arvon out of there. But like I said, I think he thinks 2 or 3 steps ahead, but he should be thinking, he needs to think like 5 or 10 ahead, just because it's like, you don't know how, like, and he's also not the biggest on having contingency plans, which is like a Batman thing, you know? It's like Batman has contingencies and fail-safes, but Oz doesn't. Oz is like, well, shit, that didn't work out. All right, let's improvise, you know? Which is not good, but it's managed to work out for him, but he's always skating by. But yeah, when Vic couldn't plant the jewels in Johnny's, which makes sense considering, like, I mean, also, like, Vic doesn't have a lot of self-awareness. I mean, he did look around like, oh, is anyone here? It's like, should have been a lot more crafty. You're also doing it in broad daylight. You know, he's not some, like, skillful, like, thief or anything like that, you know? I mean, hell, let's not forget, this is the same person that got busted trying to, like, go after your car, which is, I guess that was supposed to be, like, the irony behind it, where it's like, oh, you got caught again, you know? So, and that screwed up Oz's plan, so Oz had to kill Arvon. He has the knife on him. I'm like, okay, so what are you going to do? At first, I was like, are you going to plant it on Johnny? Because he started shit with Johnny. But then it's like, no, he planned it on Castillo. And it's like, well, he makes the perfect patsy because it's like, well, Johnny, just because the knife is on him, that's not enough. And it's just like, Castillo makes the most sense because he was there on the route with Oz. And it's like, okay. And he's the person that Sophia trusted the most. So she wanted to kill him herself, but then Luca popped him. And so that was interesting. Because that was supposed to be her revenge to take, but he took that from her. Which I didn't talk about it. Their actor, I don't know his name, but I've seen that actor who plays her uncle, Luca, many different things. The thing I associated with the most is like, was his character name in Unnecessary Roughness? Well, not Unnecessary Roughness. It was Necessary Roughness, right? Is Nico. Funny to think about that too, considering like, well, that was the... No, I was about to say, I think that's the second thing I ever saw Makad Brooks in, because the first thing was True Blood. But, God, there's so many connections in my head flowing because of that. But anyway, what I was going to say is like, well, you know, it's like, well, Makad Brooks played Jimmy Olsen in Supergirl, and now that actor who played Nico is in this as a DC show. Once again, funny how stuff connects like that, but my brain works like that sometimes. I think it's so interesting that she, you know, at the funeral, it's all going to come back. Sorry, my brain's a little all over the place. But I think it's interesting, the Sophia of it all, where everyone's just whispering like, oh my God, I can't believe she's here. It's like, well, it's her brother's funeral. She's going to be here. So she gets shamed for not being there, but also it's like, you're drawing a lot of negative attention towards all this. I can't believe you had the audacity to actually show up. Oh my God, I can't believe she's just not in hiding. And she's just like, all these snobby people think they know me. They can whisper behind my back. Well, she gets approached by her cousin who's like, hey, oh my God, you've always dressed greatly. And you could tell Sophia needed that because it felt like, hey, here's someone who's actually talking to me, being nice to me. Hey, cuz, we're good. Oh, we should take a trip together. Remember we loved like Lake Como or something like that? It's like, oh, cool. And then that cousin got real skittish the moment her daughter was around and Sophia touched her. And Sophia was almost like, oh, I see what it is. That was all bullshit. You're scared of me and you want to pretend like you weren't. And it's just like, oh, you got to be careful. You never know what kind of happens to women in this family type of thing, and kind of bounces. And then later on, Luca's like, yeah, you should take a break. You should go to Italy sometime. And you're like, that's where that came from. He's the one that sent the cut. Like, that's why she was extra skittish. She wanted nothing to do with Sophia, but she went there because Luca told her to do that, to try and like smooth things over with Sophia, to kind of convince her to like, oh, take a girls trip. Sounds like interesting. That was all a setup. And for her, it's just kind of like, right, you want me to walk away. This is my family. I'm trying to make moves. You're not listening to me. And it's like, I bet. So she decides like she's going to work with Oz. It's like, I'm going to bring them to their knees. Like, this is my family. Because she's like, I can't trust anyone. No one else is willing to listen to me. So we might have been enemies. We have our issues, our history, but let's work together, Oz, to kind of make this happen. Bring Al's dream and make it come true, yada, 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 so on and so forth. So it's going to be interesting to see how Oz continue playing technically 3 sides to all of this, because he's trying to pretend to be loyal to the Falcone family, which is separate from working with Sophia, because that's a second entity all on its own. But then there's the third ties to the Maronis, which he has no loyalty to anyone but himself, because it's all about self-preservation, getting what he believes he deserves and what he's owed. So it's definitely going to be really interesting to see where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I really wanted to talk about. To the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.